My name is Lulanga Sydney. I'm a tutor for Business Communication 1. And in Business Communication 1, what we'll be looking at is the importance of communication in business. And as we start, we look at the learning outcomes. These learning outcomes are competencies that you are expected to attain at the end of this tutorial. You'll be expected to be able to discuss the purpose of business communication, explain the business communication process using the communication theory, demonstrate the communication process in business communication, and describe the various tools used in business communication. Now, it's important to understand why it's important to have an excellent business communication process in an organization. It's also important to understand both the verbal and the non-verbal communication, the channels that can be used. For example, here we'll be talking about memos, letters, emails. When can you use a memo? When can you use a letter? When can you use an email? Or when can you use another social platform in order for you to communicate? So these channels, they help us to deliver certain messages. And it's important in a business to have what you call an effective communication process, or to be able to communicate effectively, having an impact, or your message being able to be understood, interpreted, and acted upon the way it's supposed to. So when we are able to transmit meaning, relevant meaning to an audience, when we are able to communicate in that way, we can say that we were able to communicate effectively. Now, for us to communicate effectively, there are certain factors that we need to take into consideration. There's what you call a communication process, interpersonal communication process. There are two major players in this communication process. There's the sender of the message and the receiver of the message. It's a process. And the sender of the message has a certain message to convey. This person encodes the message and transmits the message using a certain channel, a communication channel. The receiver on the other end receives the message, decodes the message, understands the message, and then sends the feedback to the sender. Now, for this entire process to be effective, it means that the communication channel, the message that is being sent, should be clear, should be effective, should meet all the criteria that need to be met. If there's any kind of failure on the part of the message, on the part of the communication channel, there's what you call noise or a barrier to communication, and therefore the feedback that the receiver will send to the sender will be defective as well, because the message was not properly encoded, the message was not properly transmitted, and therefore the message that was received was wrong message or defective message, and the message was not properly decoded, and therefore it was not understood. So in business, there are a number of factors that we are going to consider. There are about 6 of them. As we have discussed, the medium is literally the communication channel. We are also going to look at the value, the priorities, the barriers. To whom are we sending the message to? And today, realizing that we are living in the digital world, we'll look at the role of ICT and then the message itself. And this is a process, and the process does not end. It's a continuous process. So in the medium, what we'll be looking at is how are we going to send the message? Are we going to use face-to-face, talking to the person, John talking to Martin, or Shepo talking to Joanna face to face? Is it going to be paper based, writing a letter or sending a memo or whatever it is, but on paper? Is it going to be electronic, sending an email, sending a WhatsApp message, or whatever it is that we are going to use in the electronic media? Or are we going to send an image, a picture, anything that can transmit that message? Okay. So now when we are choosing that medium, we need to realize what type of message we are sending and the channel that we are going to use, whether it's going to be effective or not. And this will help us to realize our goal. So what is important is to select an appropriate medium for the message. We need to understand the sender, we need to understand the message, we need to understand the nature of the receiver and the aims of the communication. Inappropriate medium can be a big barrier to effective communication. The second one is the value, the motivation. Why is this message being sent? Clarity of line management, for example. Whom are we reporting to? Is it going to my supervisor? Is it going to my subordinate? That needs to be very clear. If it's going to my supervisor, for example, I cannot use a memo. I can use a letter. If I'm a supervisor sending to my subordinates, I can send a memo. Also, the reflection. We need to think over the message that we are sending. Why are we sending this message? To whom? And then the coordination and organization of the business needs also to be taken note of. Okay, and then the other issue that we are going to look at, we are going to for now we can leave out the barriers. We'll come back to the barriers later. To whom are we sending that message? Is it formal communication to do with work, to do with people that we don't know very well, but we want to send certain message, to ask for certain information, or to send certain information? Is it informal, camaraderie, friends, people that we are familiar with? Is it fellow staff, customers, stakeholders, all kind of stakeholders there? Okay, we need to realize that. And then if we know whom we are sending to, then we can choose the right media or medium of communication. And we can send, for example, an email. And when we are sending an email, if it's a formal email, we need to put full sentences. We should not use short words or words. For example, instead of using for as FOR, we put the number 4 if it's a formal letter or a formal communication. If it's an informal one, we can use the type of language that we use with the people who would understand them. So we need to understand the damage that can be caused by inappropriate email messages. We need to understand the expectations of the receiver, the one who has asked us to send the message, or ourselves sending the message. We need to understand the situation. Why are we sending this message? Can this person decode the message? Okay, so we also need to understand whether it's good news that we are sending. Is it bad news? Is it information? Is it an instruction? All those will help us to determine how we are sending the message. Now, the message itself, we need to look at the aim of the message. As we have already belabored the same point, we need to understand the purpose of the message, the type of message that we are sending. We need to bring about clarity when we are sending messages. confused messages can bring the situation to disarray. It can bring us a lot of problems. We can also realize the importance of the message. Okay. So the message will help us to realize what we want to achieve by sending that message. And if we are sending that message, we need to realize the method of delivery, the effectiveness of the feedback, whether what we are sending is of greater importance, of less importance, and whatever. Now we come back to the role of ICT. Now ICT has brought a lot of good things. As you can see, the picture there shows of a laptop. ICT, information communication technology, it has brought about the issue of speed, the issue of accuracy, the issue of clarity. Sometimes there's an element of personnel in it, although some people say there's less of personnel when you are dealing with ICT. We don't see the people that we are communicating to. Sometimes we can make mistakes of sending a wrong message to the wrong person. And then they also talk about cost and benefits. Certain areas ICT has become cheaper. It's becoming cheaper and cheaper in various parts of the world. Okay, and the challenge of ICT is that it can be abused. Now we come back to the issue about barriers. Barriers are blockages, anything that can make it difficult for the receiver to receive the message from the sender. Remember, we talked about the sender encoding the message, transmitting the message through the channel of communication, the receiver receiving the message, decoding the message, understanding the message, and sending feedback. So there could be a number of barriers. That noise, that chatter that we saw earlier, it can be caused by language. For example, I cannot speak Chinese, and someone sends me a message in Chinese. I'm unable to decode that message. So that language barrier will make me not understand the message, not appreciate the message. It could be a technical content. There are a number of factors there. It could be emotional interference. It could be the quantity or the quantity of information, too much information being given, inappropriate medium. For example, if I'm sending someone in the village some message, I use an email. The person who doesn't have access to email, the person will not receive the message. Sometimes it's lack of trust, lack of honesty. Sometimes it's cultural differences. Some cultures we can call each other by the first name. Some cultures we are not allowed to do that as long as there's an age difference. Sometimes it's also poor listening skills. Elders, the issue of hierarchy, bureaucracy. So all those could be elements of barriers. So as we have said, that barriers could be complex and multi-layered. They could be technical or generated by the medium itself. There are a number of issues that when it comes to barriers, for example, the major problem could be human behavior of psychology, trust, mistrust, presumptions, perceptions about certain people, cultural differences. Okay. Now, what is important for us is to ensure that the message is effective. Effective communication takes place in an organization, and people are able to understand this message and be able to give feedback. So, obstacles to effective communication, what we call noise. The noise, we have looked at a number of factors that can cause that. And what happens is that sometimes the sender is unsure what message to communicate. For example, if the person communicating is not clear himself, it will cause a problem. The message will not be encoded. The wrong channel may be chosen. The message may be wrongly decoded. The receiver may also lack time or may not have experience. So in short, the communication barriers, putting them into 6 major areas. We'll talk about physical barriers, language barriers, body language barriers, perceptual barriers, organizational barriers, and cultural barriers. Now, how could we work on that? We could do a number of things on our own, and also we can also be helped and help other people when it comes to effective communication. One of the things that we need to work on when we are doing our own talking, for example, face-to-face, making presentations, we need to keep an eye contact. We also need to work on the tone of the voice, the facial expressions, gestures, and posture. Those are 4 areas that we really need to work on. Okay. Now, there are a number of channels that we can also use for effective communication. For example, we need to figure out the right way to send a message. There are a number of options. For example, a memo or a report. We said it's an effective way for a supervisor to send to the subordinates. A report is sent by a subordinate to somebody higher. There's no information from the tone or body language. We don't see the body language there. We don't see the tone. Although sometimes the language you may understand, you may see, you may pick up certain things from the language that is used in the memo. The email, there are very few words. Emails are mostly for basic communication. Okay. Voicemail, the audience gains tone, but there's no body language when you send a voicemail. Telephone conversation, we also benefit when we talk to somebody. We can see some changes in their tone, although we don't see the person. Video conferencing conveys richness similar to in-person communication. Video conferencing, for example, what we are doing now, you may be able to see me, and you may be able to see certain things about me in this presentation. So in-person presentation, audience experiences all the elements of the message. They will see the person, they will see the body language, they will understand, they will experience the change in the tone, they will see the facial expressions and the rest. So everything is seen when you meet the person. Face-to-face meeting, also the same. So what we have looked at in this business communication is that it's important to communicate in business. It's beneficial to have an effective communication process in an organization.